Hello my dear students, welcome to Teacher at Home. Today class we are going to learn the second chapter, World in the 20th century. The map of the continent of Africa is given. Find out the specialty of the boundaries of African countries. You will see that most of the border lines are straight. Why do African countries share straight border lines? The Europeans who reached Africa in search of natural resources partitioned the continent at the beginning of the 20th century. On the basis of some agreements among the European countries, they divided the African nation among themselves by just drawing straight lines on the map. Why did the European nation partition Africa? Is a part of exploitation of resources by the European countries. Similar process occurred in other parts of the world, from capitalism to imperialism. In the previous classes, we have discussed the Industrial Revolution that began in the 18th century, gradually spread from England to other countries of Europe. Capitalists invested in factories and the production was increased. This increased their profit. Economic system in which production and distribution controlled by the capitalists with the aim to increase profit is known as capitalism. Advent of large-scale industries enhanced capital investment. Many nations produced more than they needed and more than they could accommodate in their domestic markets. This overproduction forced them to search for markets. The search for markets by the industrialized countries in Europe led to the competition among them. The Europeans had already established trade relationship with Asian, African and Latin American nations. Using political power and military forces, the European countries economically exploited these nations. Later, they became the colony of the European countries. This progress is called colonization. Trade unions were formed to protect against capitalist exploitation. Constant agitations of trade unions and the resultant increase in the wages diminished the profit of the capitalist. European countries had considered the colonies as the source of raw materials and the market for the industrial products. Later on, colonial masters started to invest capital in the colonies. Let's find the factors that included them to do so. Cheap labor, availability of raw materials, low cost involved in manufacturing and selling goods in colonies. The distinctive phase of flow of finance capital to colonies is known as imperialism. Imposing a nation's political, economic and cultural dominance on another nation is a fundamental feature of imperialism. Colonies impose their dominance using legal system, administrative measures, military force, etc. How does imperialism affect the colonies? Traditional economic system of the colonies were destroyed. Administrative and judicial system were replaced. People in colonies were forced to cultivate cash crops in lieu of traditional food crops. Poverty and unemployment increased. Natural resources were widely exploited. Indigenous arts, literature, language, culture, and economic system were destroyed. Competition and conflict among imperialist nations for colonies and market led to the outbreak of wars. The First World War. The conflict among the imperialist powers ultimately led to the entire world to the war. Let's find out the reason behind this. The European nations warred with each other in establishing colonies. This competition led to conflict among them and caused mutual distrust and enmity. This further drove the nations to the signing of military alliances. The Triple Alliance and Triple Entity were examples of such military alliances. Triple Alliance and Triple Entity: Germany, Austria, Hungary, Italy, England, France and Russia. The formation of such alliances created a war atmosphere in Europe. They started manufacturing and buying lethal weapons. European nations resorted to various strategies to succeed in their imperialist competitions. Aggressive nationalism was one among them. The European nations used aggressive nationalism to invade other countries. Aggressive nationalists considered their own nations as the supreme, justified whatever be the actions of their nations. Various movements in Europe, such as pan-slave, pan-German revenge movement, were an offshoot of aggressive nationalism. Pan-slave movement. Russia wanted to unite the Slavic people of Serbia, Bulgaria, Greece, etc. in Eastern Europe under her leadership For this, the Pan-Slav movement was formed with the help of Russia. To establish its dominance in Central Europe and Balkan provinces, Germany planned to unite the Teutonic people. This pan-German movement came into being under the leadership of Germany. Revenge movement. In 1871, Germany occupied Alsace-Lorraine, the territories that were under the control of France. To regain their territories, the revenge movement was formed under the leadership of France. Imperialist rivalry drove the European countries into several crises, among which the Moroccan crisis and the Balkan crisis were considered to be important. Imperialist crisis. A secret treaty was signed between Britain and France in 1904. According to this, Britain recognized the claim of France over Morocco. The French claim over Morocco was opposed by Germany, which sent battleship to the Moroccan port, Agadir. France agreed to transfer a part of the French Congo to Germany, and Germany agreed to concede Morocco to France in return. Thus, the problem was solved temporarily. However, the rivalry continued. The Balkan region is situated in Europe, close to the Aegean Sea and the Black Sea. It was part of the Ottoman Empire. In 1912, Balkan League defeated Turkey. However, the conflict among the allied nations in sharing the benefits of war led to the breakup of the League and resulted in wars among them. When Austria laid its claim over the Balkan region with the support of Germany, Serbia claimed this region with the support of Russia. During this time, a Serbian youth, Gavrilo Princip, assassinated Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the throne of Austria, at the Bosnian capital Sarajevo in July 1914. Austria held Serbia responsible for it, declared war on Serbia on 20th July 1914. Allied nations rushed to help their allies. Almost all the nations of the world, directly or indirectly, were involved in it. Therefore, this war is known as the First World War. Aftermath of the war. Grand Illusion, one of the best war film directed by Jean Renoir, tells the story of French prisoners during the First World War. The prints of Grand Illusion were destroyed by the Nazis but were discovered later. All Quiet on the Western Front, directed by Lewis Milestone, and Stanley Kubrick's Path of Glory are visual manifestations of the First World War. First World War ended in 1918. It produced far-reaching impact across the world. Over 12 million people lost their lives or were injured in the war. Agriculture, industry, and communication system were destroyed. Poverty, unemployment, and inflation increased. Economic dominance of Europe diminished. Liberation movement in Asia and Africa strengthened. In a bid to bring about peace in the world, the League of Nations was formed. Peace effort. A peace conference was convened at Paris in 1919 to discuss post-war situation under the leadership of the winning allies, Britain and France. They signed different treaties with the defeated nations. Among these treaties, the Versailles Treaty, signed with Germany in 1919, was the most important one. According to this treaty, German colonies were divided among the victorious powers, and Germany was forced to pay a huge amount as war indemnity. The Allies occupied rich mines of Germany. Above all, war guilt was imposed on Germany and was disarmed. Economic depression. The United States of America was not affected by the war. Hence, the European nation managed to get loans from the USA. Consequently, American dollar overtook British pound as the basis of foreign exchange holding. As a result, the United States of America emerged as a new economic power outside Europe. The economic growth of the USA did not last long. The world was thrown into economic crisis in 1929, which originated in the USA. Let's look at the impacts in the economic depression. People who became pauper because of the war could not afford the commodities. Goods were kept unsold in factories. European nations filed to repay their debts to the USA. Banks collapsed. Inflation became uncontrollable. Acute unemployment and poverty. To overcome the crisis, the European nation adopted a strategy of imposing heavy taxes on the colonies. Therefore, the economic crisis of imperialist nations became a burden to the colonies. The stock market crash in New York Stock Exchange on 24th October 1929 is known as the Black Thursday. The crash Crash wiped out the single day the entire economic growth till then. In panic, investors rushed to sell their stocks, which led to a massive volume of stock trade. Ultimately, this led to abrupt and dramatic price decline. The Great Depression that left a disastrous impact on both American and European nations followed the crash. Many lost their wealth, and those who could not bear the loss committed suicide. The production rate plunged, unemployment became grave, and world trade completely collapsed. Fascism and Nazism. To those who can hear me, I say, do not aspire. The misery that is now upon this is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of man who fear the way of human progress. The hate of man will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people, and so long as men live, liberty will never perish. From Charlie Chaplin's film, The Great Dictator. This was Charlie Chaplin's view on the dictatorship that became prevalent in some European nations after the First World War. Let's see the circumstances which led to the formation of such government. First World War devastated both the Allies. Many European governments lost their power. People were in misery. Unemployment, poverty, and inflation guard their entire systems. Fascism in Italy and Nazism in Germany rose to power, capitalizing on the political and economic chaos prevailing them. Economic destruction, rivalry against the victors, aimlessness, etc., facilitated these forces to grab power. Here are the characteristics of fascism. Fascism, antagonism to democracy, opposition to socialism, glorifying the nation, adoring the purity of race, justifying war, discussion of aggressive nationalism, defying the past, indoctrination of ideologies through artists, art, literature, and education, military dictatorship, destruction of political rivals. Mussolini and fascism. War is to a man what maternity is to women. Mussolini. These are the words of Benito Mussolini, who led fascist reign in Italy. Let's discuss the circumstances under which the fascist party came to power in Italy. Italy not nothing, though she was with the victors in the First World War. Post-war destruction of industries, unemployment, increase in tax, inflation, etc., kept people away from the government. Industrialists, in fear of Italy moving to socialism, were prompted to support fascism. When the First World War broke out, Italy withdrew from the Triple Alliance and joined the British-French alliance. Hence, by the end of the war, Italy was with the victors. Mussolini resorted to despotic measures in the political and economic fields of Italy. Violence and ferocity were the strategies of the fascists. Socialists and leaders of peasants and workers were proclaimed as enemies to the nation. Those who opposed the fascist party were executed. The aim of Mussolini was to restore ancient Roman Empire. As part of this, he adopted several symbols of ancient Roman administration. Using this military force, the black shirts Mussolini suppressed the opponents through fascist policies. His aggressive foreign policy led him to conquer nations like Ethiopia, Albania. Italy's run for dictatorship paved the way for the outbreak of another war. Hitler and Nazism. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionist, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. German Pastor Martin Niemöller. Nazism is the German version of fascism. Let's look at the factors that helped Hitler, the leader of Nazi party, come to power in Germany. Treaty of Versailles imposed by the victorious Allies on Germany after the First World War. Economic destruction and inflation. Failure of German government and the resultant political uncertainty. Anne Frank's diary entries are the testament of the assault and cruelty of Nazi rule. Anne Frank, along with her family, went into hiding during the war but were caught later. Anne Frank and her sister were detained in the Auschwitz concentration camp. Both of them died in the same camp. Chambaraman Pillai was a Malayali activist and revolutionary who fought for the freedom of India until his death. He was the foreign minister of the provisional government of India set up in Kabul under Raja Mahendra Pratap. He had the privilege of being the only foreign member in Pan-German Nationalist Party. As he raised his views against Hitler and Nazi Party, he became their enemy. These assets were confiscated. It is reported that the Nazis, under orders from Hitler, killed Champagaraman Pillai. With his oratory skills and organizational abilities, Hitler easily succeeded in gaining popular support. He dismissed the government and captured power. Socialists, communists, Jews, and Democrats were executed. Hitler held the Jews responsible for Germany's ruin and humiliation. Jews were massacred en masse in specially built concentration camps. This was known as the Holocaust. A military force, brown shirts, and a secret police trooper, Gestapo, were in the charge of assaulting and massacring the Jews. Hitler projected the purity of the Aryan race and argued that the Aryans should rule the world. He defeated the Aryans, ancestry of the Germans. All other political parties except the Nazi party were banned. Trade unions were also banned. Military service was made compulsory. Hitler incited a spirit of revenge among the Germans against the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. He used newspapers, radio, cinema, education system widely to propagate the ideologies of Nazism. Take advantage of a feeling of revenge among Germans, Hitler adopted an aggressive foreign policy, attacked Austria and Czechoslovakia. Germany formed alliance with Italy and Japan. It was opposed by other countries. Ultimately, this led to the outbreak of another World War. So that's all about this chapter. The second part we can see in the next video. So if you are interested, please do like, share and subscribe my channel. Okay, thank you.